Hello, and welcome to this week's Movie Math, which is a few days late. In fact, I wasn't even sure I was going to do a Movie Math this week because of the delay. I had a personal matter come up, so I couldn't make the video on Sunday or even Monday. And then with the Black Panther 2 trailer, here it is Wednesday already. But a number of you not only make Movie Math a part of your weekly routine, which means so much to me. That means I just can't tell you how much that means to me, because I enjoy our discussions too. But a number of you were very curious as to what I thought about Bros. So I'm going to tell you my thoughts, and I'm going to be really, really honest about it. A conversation that I feel many people are sidestepping. And I'm not only going to talk to you about the creative issues with the movie, but the business issues as well. So many problems with this movie. And I have 2 columns of notes, so buckle in. And I'm very curious to hear your own thoughts down below. And be constructive, no hate here. And I think it isn't as hateful a situation as Billy Eichner is making it out to be, or to be honest, hopes that it is, because that gets him off the hook. But it's really just a referendum on what he delivered. All right, so Eichner's situation reminds me actually of B.J. Novak's, another writer with on-camera ambitions who released his own movie that he wrote earlier this year, where in both cases the insistence of playing the lead torpedoed these writers' the appeal of their movies, the mainstream appeal for their movie. They just completely ruined it by insisting they play the lead. I can understand they want to act, and I think they're both pretty good actors. That's right. I'm defending Billy Eichner's acting ability, and we'll talk about that. But I don't think that they're leads. Certainly not yet. You have to earn that. Hardly anyone starts out as a lead. That's why when you watch old movies, you go, oh, hey, look who it is. I never knew they had a supporting role in that movie, because by the time they were a household name, they were already famous. So any aspiring actor out there who wants to write their own stuff, there's always an exception like Sylvester Stallone in Rocky, who wrote himself right to the top, but he was just so perfect for that role and very good in it. But, write yourself a strong supporting role, and then you could move your way up to lead. Bill Hader is a good example of that, actually. And Bill Hader, of course, is in one of the movies that led Billy Eichner down this path. All right, so the reason that Billy Eichner probably felt that he would turn out better than B.J. Novak is that he had an edge, and that edge was Judd Apatow. And I understand where Eichner was coming from on this, because Apatow has been quite the star maker, particularly in the comedy world. We're talking Steve Carell, Seth Rogen, Amy Schumer. He even made Pete Davidson happen. And if Apatow could turn Pete Davidson into a legit actor, well, then surely he could do the same with Billy Eichner. Right? Wrong. And I believe that's for 2 reasons. 1, Billy Eichner got in his own way. And 2, because of today's cancel culture, nobody could warn him. They just had to watch him drive off the cliff. And they're like, that's crazy. There's actually 3 reasons, and that's that an LGBT rom-com is not something new, contrary to Eichner making that his entire campaign strategy. He was like, this is groundbreaking, and everyone was like, no, it's not. I think there's we watch LGBT content every month, if not every week. And I'm not just talking indie content anymore either. There's been plenty of mainstream LGBT shows and movies. And in addition to that, where the lead is LGBT, there's lots of great supporting LGBT characters these days who are very popular with nuanced story arcs. They get a lot of attention. Look at what we've been even talking about with House of the Dragon. So yes, Bros had to actually be good, as groundbreaking was off the table already. Is it good? Again, it's hard to get a truthful answer to this, from people reluctant to criticize the film to the unfortunate there is a small contingent of haters that are able to manipulate online audience scores. I think for the most part, online audience scores are pretty worthless unless you want to gauge how much people are motivated to boost or tear down a show. That's really the only thing that you get out of audience scores. The exception is CinemaScore, and the CinemaScore for Bros is excellent, but keep in mind that CinemaScore only spot polls people who paid to see the movie and want to voluntarily share their opinion. And not a lot of people saw this movie. So of course, the few people that went and are willing to talk about it liked it. So you might say, well, then wouldn't all cinema scores be positive? Cinema scores, that's why anything less than a B plus is considered pretty bad for cinema score, because people tend to be more positive in that context. Now, I know anecdotally that some of you saw the movie and did not care for it, because I saw you either tweet me or leave a comment in yesterday's live stream where we briefly discussed the movie. So we need to rely on the box office for a concrete answer as to whether this movie is good. And the box office is terrible. Whew! I suspect the trailer was off-putting to the majority of audiences. Now, one can argue that the film, based off that trailer, didn't cast a wide enough net to appeal to audiences. And that's, again, because Eichner created that problem for himself. I mean, right off the bat, you have someone who felt people should see his movie rather than realizing that it's a very competitive marketplace right now for everyone, and he had to entice people to see his movie. And he shouldn't be insulted by that. That's the game that everybody has to play these days. There's just so much content. And I don't really think there's any group at this point. Well, I think the Latino group remains underrepresented, but even that's being finally addressed. But yeah, I think that the LGBT group, it certainly is not wanting for representation anymore. Now, as for his acting, I saw a couple of people criticize Eichner's acting. I'm familiar with him with The Lion King, which he had a very small dose, and I thought he was a good Timon. You know, he has that Nathan Lane-esque quality. And also, I saw him as Fred Savage's boyfriend in a supporting role on Netflix's Friends from College, which, by the way, was spearheaded by Nick Stoller, who happens to be Eichner's creative partner on Bros, his co-writer and his director. Now, on Friends from College, I actually liked that show. Eichner was excellent. He was excellent on that show. But he actually acted on Friends from College. He played a much more serious character, and his comedic abilities gave that muted performance a fantastic edge. You could sense there was this really aggressive comedic inner monologue boiling just beneath the surface, which would occasionally slip out with great effectiveness. It was a great performance, and I felt when Bros was first announced, I too felt that it was a good idea, because I felt Eichner, after that performance, maybe was ready to graduate to a lead role. But in Bros, he's not acting. He's not only just playing himself with long stand-up comedy style monologues, or you could say diatribes, than actual scenes where characters interact. That's also really bad. The movie just came across as very preachy. And you'd be like, why didn't someone tell him to rewrite the script? We're getting to it. But also, not only is he playing himself, but how he sees himself. And I don't think Billy Eichner is very self-aware. Clearly, he thinks he should have Dan Levy's career, and even makes a joke about that in the movie, which just shows how out of touch he is, because he is, Dan Levy is like everything Billy Eichner is not. And then also, I think that Billy Eichner feels he should have the career of a comparable white male who's straight. I think maybe also talk about Bill Hader. Maybe Billy Eichner sees Bill Hader and he goes, why isn't that me? It must only be because people are homophobic. But that's not true. Also, it took Bill Hader so long. I've been a fan of Bill Hader since his SNL days, where I thought he was underappreciated, and it took Bill Hader a really long time to find his voice. Now, this lack of self-awareness actually reminds me of Murray Bartlett's LGBT character on The White Lotus. This is fascinating to me. Who instantly hated Jake Lacey's straight character as soon as he showed up at the hotel. Because Murray Bartlett's character felt that he should have that life and was bitter that he did not. And I think we all recognize that friction between the two characters. But I saw a few LGBT critics and viewers explaining on social media that this is actually a common phenomenon for LGBT men in their 40s, which is, feeling that they should have the life of their straight counterparts, but don't. Simply, and it's really white male entitlement, but it's funny because, as people try to keep anyone from feeling entitled, there is apparently a group of LGBT white men who feel they should have that entitlement, but they don't. And the only thing stopping them from having it is their being LGBT. And that's why everyone said that Mike White creating that character and Bartlett's performance were so brilliant. And that's why not only was very charismatic, but that's, I think, the reason that it won so many awards. And it's interesting because that really hasn't even been explained. Everyone's just like, yeah, that was a great performance. I love Murray Bartlett. I love Murray Bartlett. He's in The Last of Us. I'm so excited for him. But that's why that was such an incredible performance, because you haven't really seen that. But Billy Eichner is that character, and he doesn't even realize it. So it's so weird. In fact, right in that terms of being that kind of person, his knee-jerk reaction to Bros bombing at the box office. He didn't have any self-reflection. He places blame on everyone else but himself, with some very aggressive tweets that he did on Sunday night, which generated a lot of headlines because it gave people the opening and the courage to venture finally that maybe the movie actually just wasn't very good from not just a creative but also a business standpoint. In addition to not casting a wide net of appeal, it also had very bad demographic appeal. It's almost an entirely Caucasian cast for all the representation that Billy Eichner claimed that he had. And as a result, it has some of the worst diversity numbers I've ever seen. It's up there with Mary Poppins Returns, the whitest of the white type of movies. And that's where my number 2 reason comes in. With social media and talent who tweet before thinking and are not self-aware and can't take criticism, how could anyone give Eichner constructive criticism? How could Stoller, Apatow, or Universal say, warn Billy Eichner about something that he was doing without the fear that Eichner, instead of taking that criticism and considering if he wanted to use it, might instead hop on social media or do interviews in the press later on, calling, Stoller, Apatow, or Universal homophobic. I mean, look how Olivia Wilde blew everything up with her interviews and her social media and how she handled her press tour. I think they didn't trust Billy Eichner to privately discuss these things. I imagine this is similar to what happened to Patty Jenkins for Wonder Woman 1984, with after the success of the first film and Jenkins saying, hey, I'm a female director producer. I think, she claimed that she understood Wonder Woman better than anyone else could. And I think that everyone else was too afraid to get in her way and to meddle. And so they were like, let's just see. Let's see. And that's fascinating to me because of cancel culture in particular. And I do think that, some of the behavior that had to change in Hollywood, some of it was abusive and predatory. But also an unfortunate side effect of that has been that screaming matches, because, creative clashes can be brutal. Though on sets and studio lots, they've gone away. And while they were really intense, I would say that a good chunk of the time, they were constructive and they ended up creating better products and better careers. But now, as I said, people just have to watch other people drive off a cliff. I mean, you hope you have everything set in play and then you wind up the toy car and you let it go. And then you hope that it goes on the path that you planned. But if it doesn't, you just have to sit there and watch it go off the side of the cliff. And you go, wow. Because these other people, Apatow, Stoller, and Universal, they'll all survive this. And Eichner won't. That's one of the few benefits of prima donnas who think that they do nothing wrong. They voluntarily take full responsibility. Again, Patty Jenkins did the same thing. They take full responsibility. So people are like, fine, you're the only one driving that toy car. Have a good trip. I hope many of you also will realize this lesson for yourself. And I think it's important to always be someone who can take well-meaning and constructive criticism. I'm not saying you shouldn't call out bad behavior if it exists, but I think, it's important to be able to tell the difference. So in short, I would say that I think it was pretty obvious to pretty much everyone that when that first trailer for Bros came out, that it was headed off a cliff. But nobody, understandably, because of where we are today, was willing to say it. I would say it's a little bit the pendulum effect. I think that we went from one extreme to the other, and I think in a matter of time, we'll settle in the middle and we'll all be better for it. And I hope that's the case. So, maybe someday someone will be able to give someone like Billy Eichner notes. So that's what I think the case is with Bros. And I do not think, by the way, that mainstream audiences overall are homophobic. I think that was a ridiculous accusation. When you consider just how many lead LGBT projects are out there, hugely successful. I mean, Heartstopper, how can anyone say anything? It's just crazy. But there are also tons of LGBT supporting characters on almost every streaming show, certainly all the big ones, and many of them are extremely well received and fan favorites. So again, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts down below about this and where you think this might also, other instances where you think this might be going on. Did it happen with She-Hulk? Did no one want to give Jessica Gao any notes? I think there's a real possibility. Fascinating. All right, so as for the rest of the box office, another horror movie opened at number 1 this year, as horror films continue to be a genre where people still value the shared experience of seeing it in a theater rather than waiting to just stream it or watch it digitally later on. The diversity demos for Smile were also excellent. But Olivia Wilde, she should continue to worry about her future, as Don't Worry, Darling, which she has, again, taken full ownership of, fell over 60% in its second weekend, the kind of drop that's even bad for a major blockbuster, but Don't Worry, Darling didn't have that great an opening to begin with. However, I'm quite happy that The Woman King is holding up very well and is approaching 50 million domestic. I don't think it'll get to 100 million at the domestic box office, but I think it could get to around 60 or 70, which would be phenomenal for that movie. And I think it'll have a healthy run in theaters before, I suspect, exploding on digital. I think it'll do very well on digital, just in time for awards voting. It's funny, I think that movie and Everything Everywhere All at Once are probably the two frontrunners right now for awards season. Two great movies. I prefer The Woman King, but I respect Everything Everywhere All at Once. Bullet Train crossed the century mark. It just made it in theaters as it hits digital as well. We'll discuss it when we get to the iTunes section. And then another film from India was able to open in the top 10, which is, I think, one of the nice side effects of theater, the theaters, the top 10 becoming, not quite as strong with a Hollywood fare. It's allowing overseas movies to break into the marketplace and get some attention, which is really nice. Over on Nielsen, this is bad. Prime's Rings of Power was a very hot ticket out of the gate, easily dominating the overall chart. So it did better than anything else on streaming in the United States that it's the week of its debut. I'm talking originals, acquired, and movies. And it almost doubled House of the Dragon's numbers. Now, sure, Rings of Power had 2 episodes debut that 1 week, while House of the Dragon is on its 3rd weekly drop, and its episodes come out at the very end of this window, Sunday nights. Plus, House of the Dragon's viewership is split between HBO Max and HBO, so the majority of its viewership is on HBO, and it isn't even counted by this chart. And this is only the United States, and House of the Dragon is has very strong viewership overseas. But I'm sure Rings of Power did as well, and again, this chart doesn't even count that anyway. But shoulda, coulda, woulda. This is a business of perception, and one look at this chart is embarrassing for House of the Dragon. However, while Rings of Power trended its debut weekend, so these numbers aren't a surprise out of the gate, nobody has ever really talked about it since. So let's see how Rings of Power does in the weeks ahead as we move forward. And House of the Dragon still trends every Sunday. Still, splitting HBO and HBO Max viewership needs to be fixed if Warner Brothers Discovery wants any of their shows to be a hot topic in the ratings discussion, because this is just really bad. It's just very bad. They can occasionally put out the headline that they want, but they're going to get accused of cooking their numbers. So they got to fix this. As for the rest of the Nielsen charts, over on originals, She-Hulk is doing better than Ms. Marvel. I'd say it's doing Obi-Wan level numbers in the middle of the pack. It could continue to rise, too. But Disney Plus needs to get another show, Marvel or Star Wars, in the top 5, preferably the top 3, like their earlier shows did. However, back then, there was less competition in the streaming world. Look how fast everything has changed. That's how quickly the space is evolving. And back then, just about a year ago, Disney Plus shows were fresh and new. What's this? But Disney Plus puts out so many that viewers are already jaded in about just a year. That's incredible. And also, another female lawyer show, Partner Track, managed to debut in the top 10 when it dropped all at once on Netflix this week. That week. This was a couple of weeks ago, because Nielsen's very behind, as you know. And over in movies, Elvis did just okay when it hit HBO Max. But again, that's because Warner Brothers Discovery made the decision to drop it on digital first and only for weeks before it went to HBO Max at no extra cost. So only they know if it was worth it in terms of the revenue generated from that decision versus subscriptions to HBO Max. Over on Netflix's charts, Do Revenge rose to number 1 in its second week, while Allison Janney did her best Liam Neeson impression and got pretty good results in the runner-up spot. And Netflix's Pay One window deal with Sony, after being on digital in the ancillary market, continues to benefit both parties. Here comes Father Stu, hitting the streamer and doing quite well. In fact, Mark Wahlberg's second movie in the top 10. Tyler Perry's A Jazzman's Blues, though, is Blue itself, debuting just at number 5. I wonder if his comments hurt that movie. But over in series, Ryan Murphy flexed his producing muscles. He still got it, with Dahmer exploding as one of the biggest debuts ever for Netflix, up there with Bridgerton and Stranger Things. And that's incredible, particularly because they had no advertising for that show. They had a last-minute push, like the week before release, largely on social media, and it really worked out for them. Just incredible numbers. Sandman would kill for those numbers, and as you could see from the trailer and stuff, and I'm sure for those of you who watched it, that's amazing so many people watched something because it was just so gruesome. But I'm sure it was also very inexpensive to produce, whereas The Sandman was one of the most expensive shows ever made. Finally, on iTunes, Bullet Train, as I said, is doing quite well at $20 a pop, but it can't beat Top Gun Maverick, which just became available for a $6 rental finally. And Elvis is also now just $6 to rent, and that popped back up into the top 10 as a result. And Aubrey Plaza's very well-reviewed Emily the Criminal is finally finding an audience on digital after a theatrical run of absolutely no significance. As for this coming week, Amsterdam will try to overcome its horrible RT score as it hits theaters. Yikes. Sony tries to have their very own Paddington with Lyle Crocodile, and awards contender Tar opens in limited release, while Netflix's own awards hopeful All Quiet on the Western Front, who would remake that movie? That's like so ridiculous. But they're going to try, and it opens just in New York City to qualify for the awards race. It has to just play in a theater for like a week. As for streaming movies, Mr. Harrigan's Phone dropped on Netflix today, while on Friday, Hulu hopes to have another Prey-type hit with a new Hellraiser movie. And then with shows, Pennyworth's new season starts tomorrow, Thursday, now on HBO Max. I know some of you like that show, so I'll be respectful. While on Friday, Disney Plus has the MCU Halloween special Werewolf by Night, and Netflix drops the entire season of Mike Flanagan's latest, The Midnight Club. And that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And what are your thoughts on Bros? Share those thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.